Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Bava Metzia. This is our 14th class on Bava Metzia. We are coming towards the end soon. And today we are going to be reviewing Daf 92 through Daf 98. Also, I want to say Chag Sameach. Today is Yom Yerushalayim. So we are very thankful for today, and it was a great day to celebrate. Okay, Daf 92. We're going to start with the Mishnah at the top of the Daf. The Mishnah tells us that a worker can eat the produce that he's working with while he's working, even if the value of the produce that he eats is more than the wage that he's going to be making. Another opinion is no, he can't eat more than his wage. He can eat up until the amount that he's going to be paid. The Mishnah also adds that we should teach people not to be gluttonous. They should not eat, all that they can, right? It shouldn't be all you can eat in the field. Because then people are not going to want to hire you if all you do is eat on the job. So the Gemara explains that even if the worker was hired to pick one cluster of grapes, he can still eat as much as he wants while he is working. Now the Gemara asks, is the food that he eats part of the wage that the worker is going to get? Or is it seen as a gift, meaning you're working for me, and as a bonus, you get to eat? The Gemara says that can the worker say, you know what? I'm not going to eat, but give it to my family, right? Whatever I could have eaten, give it to my family, right? So if it's his wage, so then it's his. He has the right to say, either give it to me or give it to somebody else. But if it's a gift, the employer is giving the gift to the worker, not to the worker's wife or the worker's children. So now the Gemara tries to come up with different ways to answer. Is it a gift or is it his wage? So the Gemara tries to bring different answers. So the first one is that the Torah, again, gives the worker a gift in the sense that he can eat while he's working. And we can see this from the Mishnah, that he can eat more than his wage. If you can eat more than your wage, it must be that it's a gift. It's not the wage. Or no, maybe you can only eat up to your wage, and then that would prove that it is the wage. He's getting paid and it's not a gift. Another way to think about it is that there's a source that says you cannot give the grapes. Let's say a worker is working and that worker is a Nazir. If you remember, the Nazir is not allowed to eat anything or drink anything that comes from grapes. So the Gemara brings a source that says that you can't give grapes to the wife and the kids of a Nazir, because it shows that it's his wage, right? We don't want to give grapes to a Nazir if he can't eat them. And the Gemara says, no, no, maybe it's just a penalty, a knas, because the person who's a Nazir should not be working in a vineyard, right? If you're not allowed to eat grapes, you really shouldn't be picking grapes. Another source says that you're not allowed to give the worker's family the produce, again, because it only belongs to the worker, not to his family. And the Gemara says, no, you can give them the produce, again, unless it's a Nazir, and then you're not allowed to give it to his family. Let's say the worker is working with figs, so he can eat, and he does not need to separate maaser, the tithes, when he's working, because again, he's eating in a temporary fashion, and therefore he does not need to separate the tithes. However, if he gives the figs to his son, so then he does need to separate maaser, but he can eat it. So here we see that the worker has the right to give it to his son. That shows that it's a wage and not a gift. Another source says that the worker who's working with neta revai. Neta revai is produce that is in its 4th year of growth, right? As we know, I think we've learned this before. The first 3 years that a fruit tree is planted, you are not allowed to eat from it. It's called orla. You're not allowed to eat from that produce. On the 4th year, it's called neta revai, from 4th, and that produce is allowed to be eaten, but it needs to be eaten in Jerusalem. So a worker who's working with this produce in the 4th year is allowed to eat the produce, but only in Jerusalem. Now, again, you can't just eat it in the field. Now, if they don't know that it was 4th year produce, then the owner needs to redeem the produce. So this is important to understand. For neta revai and maaser sheni, which is the tithe that, again, the owner brings up to Jerusalem to eat, one can redeem that fruit, meaning you transfer the sanctity onto a coin, and then that fruit can be eaten in the field, meaning outside of Jerusalem. So if the person didn't know that that's what they were going to be working with, so then the owner needs to redeem it, and then the worker can eat that produce. Now, again, this doesn't prove if it's a wage or a gift, because again, either way, you want to make sure that the worker gets what is due to him. If he didn't know that this is 4th year produce, so he thinks he's going to be able to eat, and then maybe he didn't pack a lunch, and therefore the owner needs to redeem it and give him the produce. If the worker knows that they're working with produce that is already how do we say that you have to already give maaser from this produce, meaning we've seen this before. While a person is in the field and picking produce, we do not need to separate the tithes. Let's say all the produce has been harvested and we've completed the harvesting process. At that moment, all the produce becomes what's called tevel, which means that you're not allowed to eat it till you separate the tithes. So let's say the worker now is coming in and working with this produce, and now he's not allowed to eat from it. So if he didn't know that that's the fact, so then, as we said before, the employer is liable to, right? He must feed the worker with something else because, right, or separate the tithes, the maaser, from this produce so that the worker can eat the produce. Okay. Now, let's say the worker comes to work and he stipulates that he will not eat and he just wants to get paid, right? So let's say the worker says, I'd rather you pay me more money than me being able to eat the grapes. So he can say this before he starts working. He can also make this deal for his adult children, but not for minors. Again, because when he is not supporting them, he cannot do this. And this, again, now it shows that it's a wage, right? If it's something that's owed to me, I can make a stipulation, a t'nai, to say how I want to be paid. If it's a gift, I can't make any stipulations, right? If someone wants to give you a gift, there's nothing you can do about it. And you can make this deal for your servants. Okay, Daf 93, there's a machloket if the master can say, you need to work for me and I'm not going to feed you, right? As we said before, he has a responsibility to feed him, but if he tells him before he starts working, that could be part of the deal. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 93, a person can make a and this is what we just mentioned, so this is the source. A person can make a stipulation, meaning a t'nai, as a worker, that he will be paid extra and he won't eat on the job. You can also stipulate for your adult children, your adult servants, or your wife, because they all have da'at, they have knowledge, they are able to control themselves from eating, but you cannot make this deal for minors or for animals. And if you hire workers to work with fourth year produce, neta revai, you cannot eat from it. But if you didn't know about it beforehand, so then the owner must redeem the produce and let the workers eat. And if let's say you're working with fig cakes, if you remember, what they would do is they would take figs and press them into a ring, and that's how they would dry. This is called a fig cake. So let's say you're working with fig cakes that come apart, or a wine cask that has opened. You're not allowed to eat from it because, again, it's already been finished. The harvesting or the process has been complete, and therefore it's already liable for tithes, for maaser, so you're not allowed to eat from it. Now, if you didn't know that that's what you're going to be working with, so then again, the owner has to separate maaser and feed the workers. The last part of the Mishnah, the produce watchman, right, a person who's just watching the produce, can eat, because that is the custom of the area, of the city, of the town, and it's not a biblical mandate, but it is the custom of the place. Okay, so now the Gemara explains that guards, right, people who are watching a garden or an orchard, so dirabanan, rabbinically, they are allowed to eat, but guards at a wine press are allowed to eat biblically, meaning deoraita, they're allowed to eat, or no, you can only eat in the wine press, and that is the rabbinic level. And if you're guarding a garden, you're not allowed to eat at all. And here there's a machloket if guarding produce is seen as working the produce, right? Obviously, if you're harvesting, I understand that that's called work. But if you're just watching it, to make sure, let's say, no one steals it, that is a machloket if it's seen as work. And let's say you're watching 5 different fields, you should eat proportionally from each one. And again, this proves that watching is working, because we're saying you're allowed to eat from the produce, or no, it doesn't prove anything. Maybe the produce was already harvested, but they weren't completed, and that's why you can eat. Okay, we are now going to begin. Now we have discussed the 4 shomrim, the 4 watchmen or custodians. We've seen this before, but this is the source. This is the Mishnah that talks about these 4, again, custodians, watchmen. So as we know, the Mishnah tells us there are 4 shomrim. Again, lishmor means to watch. So who are these 4 shomrim? As we know, there's shomer chinam, someone who is basically doing you a favor. They're not getting paid. And the Mishnah is now going to list the responsibilities of each one of these guardians. So a shomer chinam, someone who is not getting paid to watch over your things, that, let's say something happens, that person is allowed to take an oath that they were not negligent, and then when they take that oath, they are exempt. They do not have to pay for anything. A shoel means a borrower, right? Can I borrow something? That is going to be the highest responsibility, because I'm giving you something, you asked for it, so you need to be responsible for it. This person pays for everything. And then the last 2 are the renter, socher, and the shomer sachar, which is a watchman who's being paid. It's their job. The Mishnah puts them together. The renter and the paid watchman, they are responsible for, let's say it's an animal or a utensil, if it gets broken, if it's captured, or if it dies, they're exempt from those things, but they are liable for if it gets lost or if it's stolen. So that is the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to go through each one of these things. So the Gemara tells us that there's actually a machloket if the renter, the socher, is he like shomer chinam, right? The least responsibility, the person who's not getting paid to watch, or he's like the shomer sachar, the person who's getting paid to watch. And again, as we said, even though we have 4 custodians, we have 3 levels of liability, right? The most lenient, the unpaid watchman, the most severe or extreme, that is the borrower. And then in between, we have the renter and the paid custodian. Okay, so now the Gemara talks about the concept of watching. Right? If you watch something in the regular way, right, what's seen as a normal level of watching, so then you're exempt. You do not need to watch extra careful if you're going to be paid. Of course, we're going to discuss more about this. Then we have the concept of ones. Ones means basically an unavoidable mishap, something that you couldn't have anticipated. What is ones? Let's say you were attacked by an armed robber, right? So there's nothing you can do about that. There's no negligence. And then we'll see, right, who's responsible for that or not, right? So the town guards, people who are watching a town, they have an extra responsibility, but a regular paid watchman only needs a regular level of guarding. Let's say a shepherd took a break, like all the shepherds do, right? Let's say in the shepherd guidebook, it says that you're allowed to take a break from 10 to 11 every morning. So let's say the shepherd took a break, and then something happens in that time, they're exempt because everybody knows that he's allowed to take a break. Let's say it was not during the normal time, right? So what we would call maybe shirking your responsibility. You took an extra break or you took a long break. Then if he could have prevented the damage, if he would have been there, so then he's liable. If not, then not. The shomer chinam, the person who's not getting paid, if you could have gotten other people to help him for free. So then, again, let's say something happens and the animal gets hurt or dies. If he could have asked people, hey, guys, can you just help me for a minute? My animal is, I don't know, falling or tripping. Can you help me pick him up? If he could have gotten people for free and he didn't, so then he didn't do everything he could and he is liable. But if not, meaning if nobody was around or nobody would have helped him for free, so then he's not liable. The shomer sachar, right, the person who is getting paid to watch this item or animal, he actually needs to pay people to help him. And if he doesn't, so then he is liable. The Gemara gives stories of guards who are watching different animals and where they were liable for damage that happened to the animals. Okay, next Mishnah. Let's say a shepherd is watching his sheep and one wolf attacked. This is not onus. This is not an unavoidable mishap, right? I guess one wolf is not scary, so the shepherd should have shooed it away. And if he didn't, he's liable. But let's say it was 2 wolves, then that's already too much and he would not be liable. Or no, even 1 wolf, you would be liable. Let's say 2 dogs came. That's not onus, right? You could have shooed away 2 dogs, but if it's 3 dogs, then okay, that's already dangerous and you're not liable. However, if you have 2 dogs coming from 2 separate directions, that also is dangerous and it's not your responsibility. Again, I think it's fascinating to think about how even the Mishnah and the Gemara think about danger, responsibility, and when you are responsible and when you know, don't have any control over a situation. Um, let's say a robber comes, right? So that's dangerous, that's scary, that's called ones, it's not your fault. Let's say a lion, a bear, a snake. Again, these seem to be things that are found in Israel. Again, it's considered ones, it's dangerous, it's not your fault when they come on their own. However, if the shepherd brought the animals to a dangerous place where you know that there are dangerous animals there, then it is not ones and it's seen as negligence, and the shepherd is seen as responsible. Let's say the animal dies. Again, it's not, you know, the sheep just dropped dead. That's not the shepherd's fault. It's ones. If, however, the shepherd was negligent and that caused the death, then he is responsible. And if he brought the animal to a steep mountain, it is not ones, meaning it's not seen as negligence. Again, if that's where animals graze, then that would be okay. All right, so the Gemara explains, right, again, an armed robber, maybe, right, it's 1 versus 1, and it's still not, that's very dangerous. It's seen as ones and not negligence. But if the shepherd is armed, maybe we would think, oh, it's one armed robber versus an armed shepherd. Maybe he could fight back. And we say, no, it's not a fair match, and it's still seen as ones. Daf number 94, the next Mishnah, tells us that a shomer chinam can stipulate that he is exempt from taking an oath, meaning, as we said, the unpaid custodian has the ability to swear and not pay. Let's say you say, can you do me a favor? Can you watch my dog? I'm going out of town. You're like, sure, no problem. I'll watch your dog. But listen, I don't want to be responsible. So if you come back and something happens, I don't want to take an oath. I don't want to have any responsibility. If you now give the dog over and you're like, okay, fine. So that's okay, fine, right? That's the agreement that you took with the person. A borrower can also stipulate that he wants to be exempt from paying, right? Can I borrow your dress? Listen, if something happens, I'm not paying for it. Now, if you don't want to give her the dress, don't give her the dress. But if you do, you've agreed to the stipulation. Again, like any business deal, you can stipulate what you want the ramifications to be. Right, so to the renter and the shomer sachar. You cannot make a stipulation that goes against the Torah, right? If the Torah says you have certain rights, a person is not allowed to say, I don't want to give you those rights, right? You're not allowed to go against what the Torah says. Again, and when you make a stipulation, what's called a t'nai, you have to say, if you do this, then you get that. And, right, but you can't say the opposite, right? I get this if I do that, right? The Mishnah tells us that for a t'nai, for stipulation, you have to say the t'nai first, and then the result. It can't be the opposite. And if you say the opposite, it's not valid. So the Gemara explains, Rabbi Yehuda actually says you can stipulate against the Torah if we're talking about a monetary deal, right? I don't want to have to pay you X if I agree to it. So, okay, I agree to it. Again, you can decide before you become a shomer what you want to be responsible for. But once you made the agreement to watch this item, you're not allowed to change the parts of your responsibility. Once you start, that's it. You have your responsibility. If a stipulation can be fulfilled, it's valid, and if not, it's not valid. Or maybe even if it can't be fulfilled, it is still valid. And with that, we finished the 8th chapter of Bava Metzia, and now we're going to begin the 9th chapter. Okay, and this is still talking about the four shomrim, the four guardians, and we're going to define their responsibility. So the Mishnah tells us, let's say a person borrowed a cow, and at the same time, he borrows or hires the owner of the cow, or vice versa, you did the owner first and then the cow, and then the cow died. So then the borrower is exempt from paying for the cow because of the verse that says in the Torah that if you borrow an animal and the owner is with it, the term is ba'alav imo. The owner is with the cow, meaning you basically rented the owner of the cow and the cow at the same time. If you did that, and now the owner of the cow is there, if the cow dies, the renter or the borrower is not responsible because the owner was there the whole time. However, if he borrowed the cow without the owner and only afterwards then was like, oh, wait, you know what? I can also use you in my field. That does not count. Even if the owner was there when the cow died, when you began the rental agreement, the owner was not part of the agreement. Therefore, the borrower is responsible and has to pay for the animal. So now the Gemara is going to explain. As I just said, the animal and the owner need to be either rented or borrowed at the same time. And now, since we mentioned the four shomrim, the four guardians, we're going to talk about the source for each one of them. So the source is from Shmot in the 24th chapter, verse 6 through 14. If you read those verses, the first verse is about a shomer chinam, again, a person who is not getting paid. The next verse is about a person who's getting paid. The next one is about a borrower. So now, right, it says ki yishal when you borrow something. The Gemara says maybe we should switch verse 1, the first one and the second one. Maybe it's not about, maybe we'll switch the order. But we say, no, again, as we said before, a person who's getting paid to watch something should be more responsible. But we see that in that the first verse speaks about getting paid, that he has to pay double if he stole it. That seems to be more stringent. And we say, no, only if he swears, and therefore it is less responsibility. Therefore, the first verse is speaking about someone who's not getting paid, and the second one is someone who pays even if he doesn't take an oath. Okay. Also, we see that the borrower has to pay for food and he has to watch the animal, but not all the time, right? Or maybe we're talking about if you borrow utensils, right? You get all the benefit from those utensils. A paid watchman and a borrower have to pay, as we said before, they have to pay for loss and theft. And this we see from the verse. The borrower also has to pay for ones, right? Again, ones is unavoidable mishaps. And that's for the borrower. As we said before, the borrower has the highest level of responsibility. Okay, Daf 95 tells us the Gemara tries to prove that the borrower is also liable for loss and theft, right? We said that the borrower has the highest level of responsibility, so he's responsible for loss and theft, and if the animal died or broke a limb, right? And how do we know this? We compare him to the person who is who is a paid guardian. And we learn, just like the paid guardian is exempt if the owner is with him, again, the idea of ba'alav imo, so too the borrower, right, if he if if the borrower borrows the animal and the owner at the same time, he is also exempt if the animal dies. Okay. So now, again, since we're comparing the different levels of responsibility for the different shomrim, the different guardians, the Gemara talks about if we're comparing two or learning one from the other, can we make one more stringent, or do they have to be the same level? This is the concept in the Gemara that's called dayo. Dayo, from the word like die, like enough. When we learn one thing from another, some say dayo, meaning we learn one from the other and have to keep them at the same level. Others say we don't say dayo, and I can learn one from the other and make it more stringent or more lenient. So that is a machloket if we use the concept of dayo or not. Let's say the owner was not the owner. Let's say the borrower is negligent, but the owner is with him at the same time. Remember, we said if the owner is with him, he's not liable. However, let's say he's negligent. So now what happened, right? Is he liable or not? The Gemara says this is a machloket. Some say he is still liable because he was negligent. Others say if the owner is there, he is not, he is exempt, right? Again, we connect this idea only to the previous verse? Again, we're learning from one verse to another, or even we can connect it to the verse above. Now, of course, because it wasn't complicated enough, the Gemara says, what if a person rented the cow, but borrowed the owner, right? Again, we said the animal and the owner have to come together, but let's say it's a different deal. One is rented and one is borrowed. The Gemara says you're still exempt. Maybe now the Gemara says maybe if someone is not being paid to watch, right, a shomer chinam, maybe he doesn't have the rule of ba'alav imo. The Gemara says no, he does. It's not taught explicitly, but we learn one from the other. Okay. Another opinion in the Gemara is, let's say that we said the shomer, the guardian, is maybe always liable till the owner is actually plowing with his animal, right? We said ba'alav imo, right, which literally means the owner is with him. Now the Gemara is trying to understand, what does it mean with him? So the first explanation was he has to be hired at the same time as the animal. Now we have another explanation. Not only that, but he actually literally has to be with the animal at that time. Right? He has to be with him the whole time. Or no, as we said before, maybe he just has to have been hired at the same time, but they don't need to be working together the entire time. Okay, Daf 96. Everyone hold on to your hats. It's getting a little bit more complicated. We have a machloket if the owner needs to be with the animal when it was borrowed, or when they were working together or not. Again, we said that was a machloket. Let's say a person borrowed an animal, not to work, but actually, right, the first case is to actually sodomize it. Is he seen as a borrower and therefore liable, or do we say that's not what people borrow animals for, and therefore he is right, again, is he liable or not? Right, again, the borrower is getting benefit, but this is not the normal way the more normal thing people borrow for. Just as a introduction to this page, this Daf 96, there are going to be a lot of questions and very few answers. So I'm just preparing you that we're not necessarily going to have answers, but we are going to try to pose many questions because this is a Daf with Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama always tries to tests the limits of rules that we have in the Gemara. Sometimes he's seen as going a little too far, but he says, you said if you borrow and the owner is there, you're liable? Really? How far can I take this? Actually, I have a friend who wrote a dissertation on her doctoral dissertation on Rami Bar Chama. So if you want more information, I'm happy to share. But this daf is a very classical Rami Bar Chama daf where he's pushing, right? How far can we push this to the limits? So he asks, right, what if you borrowed the animal just to look important, right? Look at all the cows that I own, right? So you're not getting active benefit from the animal. The animal's not doing anything. It's just standing there. Let's say you borrow the animal to work less than a pruta value of work, right? Again, that's seen as insignificant. Or you borrow 2 cows to work together the value of a pruta. And I literally have in my notes, there is no answer. Okay, let's keep going. Let's say you borrowed a cow from 2 people. Right, from like 2 partners, and only one partner works with the animal. Remember, we said ba'alav imo. What if there are 2 ba'alim? What if there are 2 owners and you only have one of them working for you? Is that enough, or you need both of them? Right? Flip it. Let's say there are 2 people who borrowed the cow, and the owner only works for one of them. Right? Is that enough? Let's say you borrowed a cow from the property of the wife. Again, if you remember in Seder Nashim, we learned about the concept of nichsei milog. This is the property that a woman brings into the marriage, that she retains the rights to the property. Again, property, I mean, could be land, could be animals, could be slaves. But the husband has the right to work the land and get all the produce. So a person borrowed the cow from the wife and then hired the husband to do the work. So is the husband seen as the owner of this cow or not? And here the Gemara talks about, because the husband has the rights to the produce, is he seen as the rightful owner or not? That's one question. Another question, another case is you borrowed a cow and you hired the agent of the owner, right? The shaliach. Now, do we say that the agent of the owner is like the owner and therefore ba'alav imo, and you're not responsible for it? Or no, it's the agent, it's not the owner. That is, it gets a little confusing on this daf because it uses the word Baal, and we know that Baal has 2 meanings. It could mean the husband, and it's the case of the husband and the wife, but it could also mean Baal, the owner, right? Because we've been saying Ba'alav imo means the owner. This daf got very confusing because it uses the same word to mean 2 different things, husband and owner. Okay, let's continue. Right, again, as we said, there's a machloket if you have the rights to the fruit. Is it like you own the property or no? Right, and we also have a machloket if the agent, again, that's a separate case, if the agent is seen as the extension of the owner or not. Again, right, let's say, what if a slave goes with the borrowed animal? Now, this is the slave, not the agent, right? Not the shaliach, but a slave. Again, is he seen as an agent, right? Someone who the owner sent, or no, he's not Jewish, and therefore he doesn't count as an agent. Or do we say, no, a slave is more literally like the extension of the owner, and is he seen as the owner? And the Gemara actually says that the slave is seen as an extension of the master, and therefore, if he goes with the animal, it's seen as if the master is there, and the shomer, the guardian, is not liable. Now, again, right? So the Gemara asks, what is the responsibility of the husband to the wife's property that she brings into the marriage, the nichsei milog, right? Is he seen as a borrower or a renter, right? Again, as we said, those have different levels of responsibility, right? Is he seen as a borrower because he can use those items, or is he seen as a renter because he actually has to like pay her, meaning the fact that he has the rights to her property makes him liable to have to redeem her, right? She gets certain rights from this transaction. But again, the wife maybe the wife is always there, again, in that relationship, and therefore he is not responsible for these items, right? Let's say the husband borrowed a cow from the woman when she was single, and then he married her. Now, does it change the relationship? Right? Is he seen as a renter or a borrower? Or let's say a woman rented a cow from someone else, and then the man married her. Is the husband, again, seen as a borrower or a renter? And then the Gemara says, no, actually, the husband is seen as a buyer, a lokeach, not a borrower and not a lender and not a renter. He is seen as a buyer. And that is that case, right? Let's say an animal became weak or died because of the regular work that it was doing. The borrower or the lender or the shomer is not liable. Again, if you borrow the ox to plow your field and it's plowing the field and it dies, that's not your fault, right? You hired this animal to do a certain job. It couldn't do the job. It's not your responsibility, right? The same thing is if you use a utensil in a normal way and it broke, you're exempt from paying for that utensil, right? Daf 97. And this is a fascinating discussion. Fascinating. It's an interesting discussion. Let's say you borrowed a cat to kill mice. But the mice, literally, this is what the Gemara says, the mice ganged up on the cat and it killed it. Is it seen as a work-related death and you're exempt? Or no, right? Again, crazy scenario. What if the cat ate too many mice and then it died? Also, is it seen as a work-related injury? And again, I cannot even make these things up. Let's say you ask, the Gemara says that if you are renting a cow from the owner, and at the moment that you rent the cow, you ask the owner for a cup of water. This is seen as you having the owner work for you, right? Because he's getting you a cup of water. And therefore, it's seen as ba'alav imo, right? At the moment that you rented the cow, the owner worked for you, and therefore you're not liable for damages. So if you're smart and you learn Gemara, so that if you're the owner, you should say, first borrow the cow, sign on the dotted line, then I'll bring you a cup of water, right? And as we said before, if it's not at the same time, you are liable. If you borrow from a municipal worker, right, a person who works for the city, who's getting paid from taxes, and the Gemara lists these people, a teacher, a gardener, a butcher, a bloodletter, they are always in service of the people, and therefore, ba'alav imo, when you rent something from them, and therefore you will always be exempt from liability. And here the Gemara talks about the teacher-student relationship, right? Who is working for who, right? Normally you would say, obviously, right, who's in service of whom, right? So the Gemara actually explains right? One could say, oh, for sure, the teacher is working for the student. Or you could say, no, for sure, the student is working for the teacher. So the Gemara explains, if the teacher does not have the ability to switch the topic, so then he's in service of the student. But if the teacher can decide what they're learning, so then the students are in service to the teacher. If the owner observed the renter loading the donkey, it's not seen as ba'alav imo, right? And therefore, if the animal died, he's liable. But if the owner helped load the donkey, then the borrower or the lender or the renter is exempt. And if the renter, again, was negligent, again, we said it's a machloket, if the owner was there, is he liable or not? Okay, next Mishnah. If a person, of course, because it hasn't been complicated enough, let's say a person half rents and half borrows an animal, right? So we can say on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I'm renting the animal. But on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm borrowing the animal. Or half the day this and half the day that. And then it dies. Now, again, remember, a renter has a different responsibility than the borrower. And now the animal dies. So the lender is going to say, it died when it was borrowed, right? Because that's when he gets paid the most money. The renter says, you know what? I'm not sure, right? I'm not sure if it died on Monday or on Tuesday. So then if the owner is sure, right? This is called bari, he's sure, but the renter is not sure. That's called shema. So then he is liable to pay because he's not sure, right? Let's go the flip side, right? If the renter is sure, but the owner is not sure, so then he's exempt from paying. If the owner says, I know this is what happened, and the renter says, no, I know this is what happened, right? Each one is bari, each one is sure. So then the renter swears, and then he's exempt. And if they both don't know, right, Shema and Shema, they both don't know, so then they split the amount because nobody knows what is the responsibility. So the Gemara goes through these cases that when you owe someone money, again, if one person is sure and the other one is not sure, we go according to the one who's sure, right? So again, you would need to pay, but with a loan, you do not need, again, with a loan, you do not need to swear, and therefore you do not need to pay. Okay, the last daf for today, daf 98. If a person, and we've seen this before, right? If someone says, you owe me $100, and then the person says, no, I only owe you 50, right? That's called modeh b'miktzat, right? A person admits to the partial claim. So then, right, let's say he says, no, I know I owe you 50, but I'm not sure about the rest. So then he needs to swear about that other 50. But again, he said, I don't know. So then he can't take an oath. Then he needs to pay, right? If you don't know and the other person knows for sure, so then you need to pay. So then the Gemara says, no, again, it wasn't complicated enough. We have to make it more complicated. The Mishnah is actually talking about 2 or 3 cows, right? Not one cow that was half rented, half borrowed, but now we have 2 or 3 cows. One is going to be rented and one is going to be borrowed. And here we'll read it out, right? So if the borrower admits about one cow, but says, I don't know about the other cow, so then they need to swear. Again, modeh b'miktzat always needs to swear, but they can't swear because they're admitting that they don't know about the other cow. Therefore, you need to pay for it. As soon as you say, I don't know, so then you need to pay. Or maybe the case is 3 cows. One died, and you say, you know what? One of them died. I admit to that. but I'm not sure which of the other two died, right? Maybe it was the rented one, or maybe it was the borrowed one. And again, because you don't know, you can't swear, therefore you pay for it. And again, right? So now the Gemara says, with the four shomrim, right, with our guardians, you need to deny part and admit part, and then you swear, right? Again, this is according to Rabbi Bar Chama. Therefore, again, the Mishnah maybe is only speaking about a case of 3 cows and 4 cows, right? Because one you have to deny, right? I say I let you 4, and you say no, you only let me 3. And one of them I admit dies, and the other 2 I'm not sure, right? So there has to be a denial and an admission. And again, as we said, right, if they're both sure, we said that the renter swears. The Gemara says, wait a minute, why does the renter swear? He denied the whole thing. So we say, really, he does not need to swear. But we're going to do something called Gilgul Shvu'ah, where we're going to roll over an oath, meaning really, he only needs to swear about one thing. But if he's already going to swear about that thing, I can ask you to swear about something else. And again, as we said, if both of them are not sure, right, Sumku says that if there's a doubt with monetary dispute, then you split the amount that is owed. And let's say you borrowed the cow with the owner, then rented it without the owner, right? Is it still seen as the owner was there? And then again, the Gemara asks in another way, right? If it goes back and forth, right? If you borrowed it and then you rented it with the owner, without the owner, and of course, our favorite line is teku, right? We do not have an answer to our questions. Just makes us more excited to keep learning. And with that, we finish this daf. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Also, I want to say, next week is Shavuot, so we cannot have class on Tuesday or Wednesday. Therefore, class is going to be on Sunday night at 9:30, not at 9. Obviously, if you cannot make it, of course, will be recorded. I'm going to try to do as many dapim as I can by Sunday, so we'll see if we can get in a whole week. And then we will pick up the following week at our regular day and time. So I will wish you again Chag Sameach for Yomi Yerushalayim, which was today, and wishing all of you a Shabbat Shalom.